The space station called Velar 7 floated in the darkness between three dying stars. It was old. It was enormous. And for almost 1,000 years, it had been home to the most famous combat school in the entire galaxy. The Galactic Combat Academy trained warriors, not soldiers who fired guns from far away, but fighters who stood close to their enemies and used blades, staffs, and their own bodies as weapons. Graduates of this academy were respected everywhere. They protected kings. They guarded treasure ships. They fought in arenas for glory and gold. On this particular morning, a new group of students arrived. They came from many different worlds. There were the tall insect-like beings with hard shells and 4 arms. There were the creatures made of living crystal that sang when they moved. There were the covered in bronze-colored scales, each one as big as a small car. And there were dozens of others, each species stranger than the last. Among all these aliens stood one human woman. Her name was, she was 26 years old with short black hair and calm dark eyes. She was not tall. She was not obviously strong. Next to the massive aliens around her, she looked almost like a child. The other students looked at her with confusion. Humans were known throughout the galaxy, but not for fighting. They were known for being stubborn. They were known for surviving things that should have killed them. They were known for spreading across the stars like weeds in a garden. But warriors, no one thought of humans as warriors. Did not seem to care what anyone thought. She stood straight and waited. The door at the far end of the training hall opened, and Instructor Aura walked in. He was with 4 thick arms and scales that looked like they had been hammered from metal. His eyes, all 4 of them, glowed amber in the dim light. He had taught at this academy for over 200 years. He had never lost a fight to a student. His word in this hall was absolute law. "Welcome," he said. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "You are here because someone believed you had potential. By the time I am finished with you, we will know if they were right or wrong." He walked slowly through the group, studying each student. When he reached, he stopped. "Human," he said, "you are the first of your kind in the Blade Division. Do you know why?" "Because no human has passed the entrance examination before," answered. Her voice was quiet but steady. "Correct, your species is unusual. You have no natural armor, no claws, no venom, no redundant hearts or secondary brains." He tilted his massive head. "And yet you are here. Interesting." He moved on, finishing his inspection. Then he returned to the front of the hall. "Today we begin with fundamentals. Each of you will receive a weapon suited to your body and your species' natural abilities. You will train with this weapon for the next 6 months. You will eat with it, sleep beside it, and dream about it. It will become part of you." He began moving through the students again, this time handing out assignments. They received curved blades that fit their 4-armed fighting style. They were given resonance staffs that amplified their natural sonic abilities. Species after species received weapons designed specifically for their bodies. When Aura reached, he held out a single short sword. "Human, you will train with this. 1 blade, single-handed grip. It is the most suitable weapon for your limited physiology." Looked at the sword, she did not take it. "With respect, instructor," she said, "I would prefer 2 swords." The training hall went silent. Every alien turned to look at the small human woman who had just questioned the greatest blade master in the galaxy. Aura's scales shifted and darkened. This was a sign of displeasure. "2 swords," he repeated. "You want to dual wield?" "Yes." "Do you understand why no one dual wields?" "I would like to hear your explanation." A sound came from Aura's throat. It might have been a laugh or it might have been a growl. "Very well, I will explain, since you clearly do not understand basic combat doctrine." He held up 2 of his own arms. To fight with 2 weapons, a warrior must process 2 completely separate streams of information, 2 different attack angles, 2 different defensive positions, 2 different momentum calculations. The brain must split its attention perfectly between both weapons while also tracking the enemy's movements. He lowered his arms. Even my people, with 4 arms and brains evolved for multi-limb coordination, do not dual-wield in serious combat. The mental strain is too great. The efficiency loss is too severe. You make 2 weak attacks instead of 1 strong attack. You create openings in your defense while your brain struggles to manage both weapons. He stepped closer too. He was 3 times her height. His shadow covered her completely. No species can dual-wield effectively. This is not opinion. This is fact. This is settled doctrine, tested across hundreds of species over thousands of years. Every civilization that has tried has abandoned the practice. It does not work. Looked up at him. She did not step back. She did not look afraid. "Define cannot," she said. The words hung in the air. Aura stared at her for a long moment. Then he placed the single sword in her hands. "You will train with 1 blade," he said. "That is my final word. When you fail, you will understand why." He walked away. Looked down at the sword in her hands. Then she looked at the weapon rack on the far wall, where dozens of other blades waited in neat rows. She smiled. The instructor had given her 1 sword. He had told her to train with 1 sword, but he had not said she could not practice with 2 on her own time. And had learned something important today. She had learned that everyone in this galaxy believed the same thing. Dual-wielding was impossible. They were wrong. She was going to prove it. The weeks that followed were the hardest of life. Every morning began at first light. The students ran through the station's outer ring, a distance of nearly 15 kilometers. Then came strength training, flexibility exercises, and meditation. After a short meal, they spent 6 hours practicing with their assigned weapons. Trained with her single sword, as ordered. She followed every instruction. She memorized every technique. She never complained, never argued, never gave anyone a reason to send her home. But every night, long after the other students had gone to sleep, she returned to the training hall. The station systems tracked movement throughout the facility. Knew that instructor Aura often watched the recordings. She did not care. She was not breaking any rules. He had told her to train with 1 sword. He had never told her she could not also train with 2. Alone in the empty hall, she took a second blade from the weapon rack. The weight felt right in her hands. It felt like home. Growing up on Earth had started sword training at age 5. Her grandmother had taught her the old ways, the traditional Korean sword arts that had been practiced for centuries. Her father, who had served in the military, had taught her practical combat. By the time she was 16, she had won competitions across Asia. By 20, she had done things that no official record would ever mention. Humans had been fighting with 2 swords for thousands of years. Different cultures had developed different styles. The Japanese had their ryu, created by the legendary. The Filipinos had their twin stick and blade arts. The Chinese had their butterfly swords. The Europeans had their rapier and dagger combinations. It was not easy. It required years of practice to develop the coordination. The brain had to learn to treat 2 weapons as a single system, not as 2 separate tools. Most people never mastered it. But it was absolutely possible. Millions of humans had done it. The problem was that no one in this galaxy believed her. One night, about a month into her training, was practicing a complex pattern when she heard movement behind her. She spun, both blades coming up in a defensive position. Stood in the doorway. His name was, and he was one of the better students in their group. His hard shell was a deep green color, and his 4 arms were thick with muscle. He had never spoken to before. "I did not mean to startle you," he said. His voice clicked and buzzed through his translator device. "I could not sleep. I saw the lights were on." Lowered her swords but did not put them away. "It's a public training hall." "Yes," walked closer, his many legs moving in perfect coordination. I have watched you practice before, through the window. And you are wasting your time. Had heard this before. She continued her practice pattern, flowing through the movements while watched. I do not say this to be cruel, the continued. The instructor is not wrong about dual wielding. My own people tried it many generations ago. We have 4 arms. We thought we were perfectly designed for it. He raised all 4 of his arms, spreading them wide. We were wrong. The neural load was too great. Warriors who tried to dual wield in real combat went mad. Their brains could not process the information fast enough. They made mistakes. They died. Completed her pattern and paused. Your people have 3 brain lobes, yes, each one specialized for different functions. That is correct. And when you tried to dual wield, you had to use 2 lobes at once, each controlling 1 pair of arms. But the lobes could not communicate fast enough. They sent conflicting signals. The warrior's body did not know which signal to obey. His mandibles clicked in surprise. You have studied our physiology. I have studied many things, raised her swords again. Human brains do not work like yours. We do not have specialized lobes. Our entire brain is what you might call generalist hardware. We can assign any part of our brain to any task. That sounds like a weakness, not a strength. Your processing is less efficient. In some ways, yes. We cannot calculate mathematics as fast as we cannot track multiple moving objects as well as but we can do something that your people cannot. She began moving through another pattern, both blades dancing through the air. We can learn to treat 2 swords as one system, not 2 separate problems to solve, but a single flowing action. Our brains build new connections between neurons when we practice. After enough time, the movement becomes automatic. We do not have to think about each sword separately. We think about the fight and our body handles the rest. Watched her move. His 4 eyes tracked each blade independently, a natural ability of his species. What you are describing should not be possible, he said slowly. And yet here I am. Humans have truly done this, fought in real combat with 2 blades. For thousands of years, against other humans, against animals, in wars and duels and desperate last stands, stopped and faced him directly. We are not the strongest species. We are not the fastest. We do not have armor or claws or venom, but we are very, very good at learning, at adapting, at doing things that should not be possible simply because no one told us we could not do them. Was silent for a long moment. Then he dipped his head in what had learned was a gesture of respect among his people. I do not know if you will succeed, he said, but I hope that you do. It would be interesting to see the instructor proven wrong. He turned and left the training hall. Watched him go, then she raised her swords and began again. She had a long way to go. The quarterly assessment was coming. Every student would have to fight the instructor in single combat. Not to win, because no student ever won, but to show their progress. Intended to show them something they had never seen before. She intended to show them that humans did not accept impossible. The day of the quarterly assessment arrived like a storm. The entire academy gathered in the main combat arena, a vast circular space with seats rising up on all sides. Students from every division came to watch. Senior instructors sat in the high galleries, their eyes sharp and judging. Even the station commander, an ancient whose crystal body had turned dark with age, attended. One by one, the students of the Blade Division were called to face Instructor Aura. The went first, fought well, lasting almost 2 minutes before the instructor disarmed him with a casual flick of his blade. The students sang their weapons into complex patterns, but Aura had fought their kind for centuries and knew every trick. The students, members of the instructor's own species, tried to use their 4 arms to overwhelm him. It did not work. No one lasted more than 3 minutes. No one landed a single clean hit. And then's name was called. She walked to the center of the arena. In her hands she carried 2 swords. The crowd, which had been murmuring quietly, went completely silent. Instructor Aura stood waiting in the ring. When he saw the 2 blades, his scales shifted to a darker color. "I assigned you 1 weapon," he said. His voice carried easily across the silent arena. "You did," agreed. She stopped at the proper distance and settled into her stance, 1 sword held forward, 1 held back near her shoulder. "And I have trained with 1 weapon during all official sessions, exactly as you ordered." "Then why do you carry 2 now?" "Because this is an assessment of combat ability, not an assessment of obedience. The rules state that students may use any weapon available in the Academy armory. These swords are from the armory." Aura made a sound that might have been irritation or amusement. It was hard to tell with. "You are technically correct. The rules do allow this." He drew a single blade, holding it loosely in one of his right hands. "Very well. Show me this human dual wielding that you believe in so strongly. I will demonstrate why the rest of the galaxy abandoned this foolishness." Did not respond with words. She simply moved. The first attack came fast and low, her left blade sweeping toward Aura's leading leg. It was a testing strike, meant to measure his reaction speed. He blocked it easily, but in the moment his blade was occupied, his right sword was already moving, cutting toward his exposed side. Aura had to use a second arm to block. His scales shifted again. "Interesting," he admitted. "You have some coordination, but coordination is not enough." He attacked. The instructor was not just big, he was fast. His blade moved in patterns that had never seen before, strikes coming from angles that seemed impossible for a creature of his size. He pressed forward, driving her back across the arena. Blocked, she deflected. She dodged. Her 2 swords worked together, one catching attacks that the other could not reach, creating a web of steel between her and this assault. She was not winning. She knew she could not win. Aura had centuries of experience, 4 arms and 50 times her strength, but she was surviving. She was making him work for every inch of ground. The crowd began to murmur again. This was taking longer than expected. Aura increased his pressure. His single blade became a blur. Felt the impacts traveling up her arms, felt her muscles beginning to burn. She was not strong enough to block his full power strikes for much longer. So she stopped trying to block them. Instead, she changed her approach. Rather than meeting his attacks with force, she began to redirect them. Her blade stopped trying to stop his sword and instead guided it past her, using his own momentum against him. She spun away from strikes instead of standing against them. She became water flowing around stone. Aura's attacks began to miss, not by much but by enough. And in the gaps between his attacks, struck back. Small cuts appeared on the instructor's arms, nothing serious, nothing that would slow it down, but the crowd saw them and the murmuring grew louder. The human was landing hits. Aura's 4 eyes narrowed. He drew a second sword. Now he had 2 blades, 1 in each right hand, and he used them with the skill of 200 years of practice. The attacks came faster, more complex from multiple angles at once. Had to retreat again. She was bleeding now too, small cuts on her arms and legs where his blades had found her. Her breath came hard. Her movements were slowing. But she did not stop. She had trained for this, not just in the academy but all her life. Every night of practice, every competition, every mission in the darkness that no official would ever acknowledge. It had all been leading to this moment. Aura drew a third sword, then a fourth. All 4 of his arms were now armed. He was fighting her with his full capability, something he had not done against any other student in over 60 years. The crowd went completely silent again, but this time it was not surprise, it was awe. The fight lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. At the end, lay on the ground, bleeding from a dozen wounds. Both of her swords had been knocked from her hands. She could barely breathe. but she was smiling. Aura stood over her, all four swords still in his hands. He was not breathing hard because did not breathe, but there was something in his posture that had not been there before. "Respect. Your form is unorthodox," he said slowly. "Your technique violates 17 established principles of blade combat." Coughed it hurt, only 17. The instructor made that sound again, the one that might have been a laugh. "It is also effective. You force me to fight seriously. No student has done that in a very long time." He put away 3 of his swords and extended his lower left arm to help her stand. "Tomorrow," he said, "you will teach me how your species does this thing that cannot be done." Took his arm and let him pull her to her feet. The arena erupted in noise, hundreds of aliens discussing what they had just witnessed. The human had not won, but she had done something far more important. She had proven them wrong. News traveled fast across the galaxy. Within 3 days, everyone on Station Velar 7 had heard about the human who made Instructor Aura fight with all 4 arms. Within a week, the story had spread to the neighboring systems. Within a month, scientists from the Galactic Institute of Xenobiology arrived at the Academy, carrying equipment and asking questions. They wanted to study. She agreed, because she understood that this was bigger than her personal victory. If the scientists could prove that human dual-wielding was real and effective, it would change how the entire galaxy thought about her species. For 5 days, she trained while wearing sensors on her head, her arms, her chest. The machines measured everything: her brain activity, her muscle movements, her eye tracking, her heart rate. The scientists watched the data flow across their screens and argued among themselves in languages that the translator devices could barely handle. On the 6th day, they called a meeting in the Academy's main lecture hall. Every instructor attended. Many senior students came as well. The station commander herself sat in the front row. The lead scientist was a named Crystalline Note 7, a being of pale blue crystal who spoke in musical tones. She stood before the crowd and began to explain what they had found. For centuries, the accepted doctrine has been that dual wielding is biomechanically inefficient for all known species, she said. Our research confirms that this is true for most species. The neural load required to independently control 2 weapons while also tracking an opponent is beyond what most brains can handle effectively. She paused. The hall was completely silent. However, human brains do not work like other brains. A holographic image appeared in the air above her. It showed a human brain, with different areas lighting up in various colors. Most species have specialized neural structures. They have separate brain lobes for each pair of arms. They have dedicated processing centers for their compound eyes. These specializations make certain tasks very efficient, but they also create limitations. The specialized structures do not communicate well with each other. She gestured, and the image changed. Now it showed the same brain during dual-wielding practice. Human brains have very few specialized structures. What they have instead is something called neuroplasticity. This means their brains can rewire themselves through repetition and practice. When a human trains to dual wield, their brain literally builds new connections to support the activity. She highlighted several areas of the brain image. These connections allow the human to process 2 weapons not as separate systems, but as a unified whole. The human does not think about each sword individually. Instead, they think about the overall combat situation, and their trained neural pathways handle the weapon coordination automatically. Instructor Aura raised one of his arms. You are saying that humans can train themselves to do things that evolution did not design them for. Precisely. Human brains are not optimized for any particular task. Instead, they are optimized for learning. Given enough time and practice, a human can develop proficiency in almost any activity, even activities that their bodies were not designed for. The hall erupted in whispered conversations. This was not just interesting. This was revolutionary. If humans could overcome the dual-wielding limitation through training alone, what else could they learn? What other, impossible, techniques might become possible? The answer came faster than anyone expected. Over the following months, more humans began arriving at Station Velar 7. Word had spread through human space that the Academy was now interested in studying their species, and young humans came from dozens of colony worlds, eager to prove themselves. Each one brought something new. A young man named joined the pilot training program. During his assessment, he demonstrated something called split-attention flying, where he controlled two separate targeting systems at the same time, hitting targets on opposite sides of his ship without losing accuracy on either one. His instructors said it was impossible. His test scores said otherwise. An engineer named solved a structural problem that had frustrated alien architects for decades. The solution required combining principles from three completely different schools of design. Any expert in any of those schools would have said the combination could not work, but was human. She did not know it was supposed to be impossible, so she did it anyway. A medic named developed a new surgical technique that required perfect ambidextrous precision. Both hands had to perform different complex movements at exactly the same time. No alien species had surgeons who could do this, but had trained since childhood, and her human brain had built the neural pathways to make it possible. One by one, the old doctrines fell. The Galactic Institute published paper after paper. Other academies and universities began recruiting human students. Researchers developed new theories about neural plasticity and adaptive learning. But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy saw humanity. For centuries, humans had been considered unremarkable. They were not the strongest, the fastest, or the longest-lived. They had no natural weapons, no special senses, no unusual abilities. They were generalists in a galaxy that respected specialists. Now the galaxy understood that being a generalist was its own kind of strength. Humans could not do everything, but they could learn almost anything. Their weakness was also their greatest weapon. Watched all of this happen with quiet satisfaction. She continued her training, improved her skills, and helped teach the new human students who arrived at the academy. She was not interested in fame or recognition. She was interested in proving that the word cannot was not a wall. It was a door waiting to be opened. And she had barely begun to open it. 5 years passed like water flowing through open hands. The galaxy changed, humanity changed with it, and changed most of all. She stood now in the same training hall where she had first arrived as a nervous recruit. The room looked the same as it always had. High ceilings, weapon racks along the walls, training mats covering the floor, but everything else was different. Was no longer a student. The twin swords at her hips were not practice weapons anymore. They were real blades, forged from starship-grade metal, their edges sharp enough to cut through armor. The handles showed wear from thousands of hours of use. The blades themselves carried small marks and scratches, memories of battles fought across a dozen worlds. A scar crossed her left eye, running from her forehead to her cheek. She had received it 2 years ago, fighting a void pirate captain who had made the mistake of thinking humans were easy prey. The captain had learned his error. He had not lived long enough to learn from it. Was 31 years old now. She was the Academy's first human senior instructor. Before her stood a new group of students. They came from many species, just as her own class had 5 years earlier. There were and dozens of others. And among them, standing together in a small cluster, were 8 young humans experiencing the galaxy for the first time. The alien students looked at the humans with curiosity and respect. This was new. 5 years ago, humans had been dismissed as unremarkable. Now they were known throughout the galaxy as the species that refused to accept impossible. "Welcome to the Blade Division," said. Her voice was calm and carried easily across the silent hall. "I am senior instructor. For the next year, I will be teaching you how to fight with edged weapons." She began to walk slowly through the group, looking at each student in turn. "Some of you come from warrior traditions. Your families have fought for generations. You believe you already know how to use a blade." She paused next to a young who stood straight and proud. "You are wrong. Everything you know is the beginning, not the end." She continued walking. "Some of you have never held a weapon before. You are afraid that you will fail, that you do not belong here, that you made a mistake by coming." She stopped next to a small human woman who could not quite meet her eyes. "You are also wrong. Fear is the beginning of courage, not the end of it." Returned to the front of the hall and faced the entire group. "I am going to tell you something that every instructor before me has said. There are things you cannot do. Your bodies have limits. Your minds have limits. The laws of physics have limits. This is true. These limits exist." She drew both of her swords in a single smooth motion. The blades sang through the air, catching the light. But here is what those instructors did not understand. The word cannot is not a wall. It is not an ending. It is a question, and questions have answers. She began to move through a practice pattern, both swords dancing around her in complex spirals. The students watched in silence. Even the aliens who had seen dual wielding before had never seen it performed at this level. When I first came to this academy, I was told that no species could dual wield effectively. The instructor was with 4 arms and 200 years of experience. He had studied every fighting style in the known galaxy. He knew, as a proven scientific fact, that what I wanted to do was impossible. She completed the pattern and stopped, both blades held crossed before her. I did not argue with him. I did not try to convince him with words. I simply practiced. Every night, alone in this hall, I trained, and when the time came, I showed him what humans could do. She looked at the human students directly. "That is your inheritance, not strength, not speed, not special abilities. Your inheritance is the refusal to accept impossible. Humans have been doing impossible things since before we left our home world. We flew when we had no wings. We went underwater when we had no gills. We traveled to the stars when we had no natural way to survive in space." She sheathed her swords. Every species in this galaxy has been told at some point that certain things cannot be done. Most species accept this. They specialize in what they are good at and avoid what they are not. This is sensible. This is efficient. This is how successful civilizations operate. She smiled. It was not a gentle smile. Humans are not sensible. We are not efficient. We are stubborn, unreasonable creatures who look at the word cannot and see it as a personal challenge. This is our greatest weakness and our greatest strength. She addressed the entire group again, humans and aliens alike. You will all face moments in your training when someone tells you that what you want to do is impossible, that your species was not built for it, that the accepted wisdom says it cannot be done. When that happens, I want you to remember 3 words. She raised her hands and drew her swords again, the motion so fast it seemed like the blades simply appeared. Define cannot. She held the position for a moment, letting the words sink in. Then she sheathed the blades once more. Training begins now. Collect your weapons from the rack. You have 1 year to prove that you belong here. I suggest you do not waste time. The students rushed to obey, but as they moved, heard some of them whispering the 3 words to themselves. Define cannot. It had become a human saying over the past 5 years. Traders used it. Soldiers used it. Engineers and scientists and explorers used it. Whenever someone said something was impossible, a human would smile and ask that question. The other species of the galaxy had learned to be careful about using absolute statements around humans. Because humans did not hear, "You cannot do this," the way other species did. They heard it as a dare. watched her students begin their first practice session. Some would fail, some would succeed, some would surprise everyone, including themselves. But all of them, human and alien alike, would learn the same lesson. The word cannot was just the beginning of a conversation. And humans had become very good at having that conversation.